Hello, welcome to the first quiz of this course. So we're going to be quizzed on the different types of triangles. So on this quiz, the direction says classify each triangle based on their sides or angles. So let's look at the first triangle. Um, they give us all three sides that are 8. So what would that be? If you need to pause, go ahead. I am going to say, since all three sides are congruent, and that means all three angles must be congruent. If you have all three sides, all three angles are congruent. You have what's called an equilateral triangle. Okay. Okay, let's move on to the next. I think there's a total of there's like 12 problems, 12 triangles. So number 2, classify each triangle based on their sides or angles. So here we are given 3 different sides. 2 of them are congruent, right? 9 and 9, they're the same. So what do you think, what kind of triangle this would be? Okay, since 2 sides are congruent, that means 2 angles are congruent. So that means you have what's called an isosceles triangle. Okay, let's move on. Number 3. So in this triangle, we are given 3 sides. They're all different. We have a side length that's 10, a side length that's 6, and a side length that is 11. So none of the sides are congruent. That means none of the angles are congruent. So what kind of triangle would this be? Okay, if you said scalene triangle, you are correct. It is definitely a scalene triangle. Okay, scalene means no sides or no angles that are congruent. Okay, number 4, this time we have a triangle that only gives us angles. So in this triangle, we have an angle of 40, 70, and 70. And notice that there's 2 angles that are the same. Okay, go ahead and think about it, and I'll give you a minute. Okay, so you have 2 angles that are congruent. That means 2 sides are congruent. So when you have 2 sides and 2 angles that are congruent, you have what's called, oh, this, you can classify this as 2 things actually. If you have to, I just realized this. This is also called, this can be classified as an acute triangle. Why is that? Because if you look at all the angles, all of them are less than 90. And what else can you call this triangle? Since we said that 2 angles are congruent, that means 2 sides are congruent, so you have what's called an isosceles triangle. So yeah, you can call this an acute isosceles triangles. Okay. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Number 5, classify each triangle based on their sides or angles. So here we have a box and a 65-degree and a 25 degrees. So what would you consider this triangle? Or sometimes it could be more than one thing. Okay, so go ahead and write down your answer. So the big clue is it has a little box symbol, so that means it is definitely a 90 degrees, so you can say a right triangle. What's another possibility of this triangle? What's sometimes you can have more than one possibility. So if you look at the angles, notice that this is a 90 degrees, this is a 25, and this is a 60, right? So notice that the angles are not the same at all. None of them are the same. So if you have, there's a good possibility that this is also a scalene triangle, right? So you can call this a scalene right triangle because here we have all angles that are different. That means they have different sides. None of the sides will be congruent, right? So that's how you know it could be a scalene. Okay, let's move on. Do 6. Classify each triangle based on their size or angles. So here we have a triangle. We have an angle that's 30, a 30, and 120 degrees. So there's a possibility there's two possible triangles in this triangle. So go ahead and pause. I will give you a minute to figure it out. Okay, so the one big clue of this triangle is this 120-degree angle. So this is 120, which is definitely greater than 90 degrees. So that means if you have an angle that's greater than 90, you have what's called an obtuse triangle. And what else can this be classified? Notice that we have 30 degrees here and a 30 degrees there. They're the same. That means if you have two angles that are the same, that means that two sides are the same. So you have what's also called an isosceles triangle. So you can call this an isosceles obtuse triangle. Okay. Okay, let's move on to the next triangle. Number 7, we are given three side lengths. They're all 2 yards. So what would you call this triangle? Okay, so if you have all 3 sides that are the same, that means all the angles are the same. So if you have all 3 angles and all 3 sides that are same, you have what's called an equilateral triangle. What's another possibility? If all the angles are the same, And I believe that they all have to be less than 90, right? It's because if this was like 91 degrees, this also has to be 91, and then this also has to be 91. That wouldn't make sense because the sum of a triangle adds up to 180, right? So if you add them up, 91 plus 91 plus 91, that gives you 273 degrees. So that will not never be a triangle. So all these angles most likely has to be less than 90. So what do you know about less than 90? It's also acute triangle. So you can call this an acute equilateral triangle. Okay. Let's move on. This triangle we have, sorry, wrong one. 7, where's 8? Okay, so I don't see 8. So let's do this one. We have a triangle that's 3 feet. I mean, it has side lengths of 3 feet, 3 feet, and 5 feet. So what triangle could this be? Notice that the sides are the same. That means two angles has to be the same. So I'm going to say an isosceles. Okay. I don't think it's an acute or an obtuse because yeah, it could be obtuse, but we just don't have enough information. Okay, so what about this one? We have a 6 feet, 4 feet, and then 9 feet. So notice that the sides are all different. That means all the angles are going to be different. So you have what's called a scalene triangle. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so we have this triangle, we have an 8 yard feet, a 7 yard, and a 9 yard. What kind of triangle would you consider this? I'm going to say scalene because all the sides are different. Now, it looks like a right triangle, but you need to have that box symbol. If it doesn't have that box symbol, so we can't call this 90 degrees. So it's just going to be a scalene triangle. Okay, let's do the last one. Okay, so on this one, we have a 15 feet, a 12 feet, and a 5 feet. So wait, let me go back to the previous one. I just want to say it is a scalene, but could it be more than a scalene? Could it be Can it be an obtuse triangle, or can it be a can it be an acute? Could it be an obtuse? Could it be yeah, so remember the formulas we went over. So they're all different sides. So let's see if it's an acute. So the acute rule states c squared is greater than a squared plus b squared, or you could think of it as a squared plus b squared is greater than c squared, because remember this right here is always backwards. So A and B represents legs, C is the largest length or the hypotenuse. So what would be one of our legs? It could be 7. And then one of my other legs is 8. And then my hypotenuse is 9. So this would be 49 plus 8 squared 64 is greater than 81. Let's see if this is true. 49 plus 64 is 113 is greater than 81. So it is greater than c squared. So that means it is definitely an acute. So it's an acute scalene triangle. Okay, let's move on to the last one. Okay, so we have a triangle, 15 feet, 12 feet, and 5 feet. So what kind of triangle is this going to be? So none of the sides are congruent. So that's a big clue that you have what's called a scalene. But you can classify this triangle even more. It can be either acute or obtuse. So an acute, let's see if it's acute. So the rule for acute is a squared plus b squared is greater than c squared. A and b represents legs. These are hypotenuse. So one of my legs is 5 squared plus my other leg is 12 squared is greater than c squared. Okay, so 5 squared is 25. 12 squared is 144 is greater than 15 squared, which is 225. So 25 plus 144 is 169. This is false. 169 is definitely not greater than 225, right? That's false. So let's see if it's an obtuse scaling triangle. So the rule for obtuse is c squared is greater than a squared plus b squared, right? Or you could think of it, because this is technically backwards, a squared plus b squared is less than c squared, right? Okay, so one of my legs is 5, so it'd be 5 squared plus 12 squared. Is that less than c squared? 15 squared. So 5 squared is 25, 12 squared is 144, less than 225. So 169 is less than 225. Is that true or false? Is 169 less than 225? It is definitely true. So you can classify this as a scalene obtuse triangle. So it's good to be specific. Okay, so that is all the different types of triangles. So we can end here. Thank you.